Hello and welcome to the first La Recoupe tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how to knit this scarf with your arms using giant yarn. The wool we're going to be using is the thickest I had at home. It's called chunky yarn and it's much thicker than the regular ones. If you want to get something similar to this one, you can buy it online. If you only have thinner yarn at home that you want to use up, that's no problem. You can use 2, 3 or more strands at the same time to get this chunky effect. You could even get creative and mix up the colours for a fun rainbow effect. Let me run you through what we're going to need for this project. First of all, a reusable plastic bag, I'll tell you why in a minute, a measuring tape, ideally with centimetres, that's how we'll be measuring it, a pair of scissors, and some chunky yarn. The one I'm using is grey and I got it from my local craft store. In the scarf I showed you in the beginning, I used 2 strands of this wool and 1 strand of another wool to give a pearlescent effect. However, for this tutorial I'm only going to be using a single strand as it's easier to follow along. But if you do want that thick effect, make sure once you've practiced to use 2 strands instead of just the one. Let me tell you why we're using a plastic bag. I'm going to give you a great tip to prevent the strands from getting tangled and dirty when you're knitting. All you need to do is place the yarn in a plastic bag, like I'm doing here. I used a reusable one, and pull out a strand, then knot the top of the bag together, and there you go, no more yarn getting tangled or dirty. Now the next step is to measure out your yarn before you start knitting. I've decided I want my scarf to be 10 stitches wide, so I'm going to measure out 3 times 50 centimetres. You can adapt these measurements to how wide you want your scarf to be. Once you've measured out your yarn, mark it off by holding it in a pinch point between your fingers. Remember which side is the tail and which side is attached to your ball of yarn. Now that we've got our yarn ready, we're going to be making a slip knot, which will allow us to start casting on. First of all, you want to make this figure, as I've done here. You're going to want to take the top loop and pass it over the bottom one, and then pull it through. That's a slip knot. So the next step is to pass it through your wrist, like so. And then adjust it so that it's not too tight, but not too loose either. There you go, that's your first stitch done. To create the other stitches, you're going to take the yarn in your index finger and thumb like this, and with your other hand you're going to pass your finger through and around and make a loop as shown. Tighten it up and place it next to the other stitch on your right hand. Make sure it's just like the first one, tightening it as needed. And then repeat the process. Here, I'll show you again. Pass your finger through, around, and make a loop. Put it through your hand, and there you go, your third stitch. We're going to repeat this 10 times as that's how many stitches we've decided to make. Well done, you've made your 10 stitches. To count them, just make sure that you've got 10 loops around your hand. I would do this at every step along the way, so you're sure you haven't lost any and that your scarf won't be wonky or have holes in it. Good job, we're ready to start knitting. First of all, you're going to place the yarn into the hand with the stitches. You're going to pass the first stitch over your hand, through the yarn, pull to make a loop, and then pass your other hand through the loop. Make sure to tighten it up as needed. To tighten it, simply pull on the thread that's attached to the ball of yarn as I'm showing here. Let me show you that one more time. You're going to put the thread that's attached to the ball of yarn into your hand where the stitches are, pass the stitch over, tighten it a little bit, put your hand through, and then tighten again by pulling on that same thread. To finish the row, you're going to do the same process 10 times over with the remaining stitches on your right hand. And there you have it, your first row of stitches done. Look at them, they look great. Just repeat that process but with the other hand where the stitches are now. And that's the second row already done. Just keep repeating this process until you get the scarf of your desired length. I'm going to show you from a different angle, just in case you haven't quite understood yet. This is my scarf. I've done quite a few rows already, but I promise it doesn't take long. You get faster as you learn. Look at all those stitches. There must be hundreds already. Something to keep in mind that I did mention at the beginning of the video is, for this thicker scarf I made earlier, you can see that in each stitch there are actually 3 threads. I've got 2 chunky knits and 1 regular. Whereas for this tutorial, to make it simple, you can see that I've only used 1. Once you're happy with the length of the scarf, you are going to pass all of the stitches back over to the right hand. You can either just slip them from one hand to the other or knit them like I'm doing here. The process is the same as I've been showing throughout this video. Right, once you've got them all over onto your right hand, make sure to count them to make sure you haven't lost any. Holding the yarn in the same hand as the stitches, you are going to knit the first one as we've been doing throughout this video. Pass it over to your other hand and tighten it as needed. Then repeat with the second stitch, doing exactly the same method as we've shown before. Now, where it changes is that you're going to grab both of those stitches at the same time and pass them over your hand. Once you've got that, you're going to take the loop and pass it through your left hand so that it's only 1 stitch remaining. Knit another stitch onto your left hand, tighten it up and pull those over. Once you've got that loop, pass it over your left hand again and continue the process, knitting 1, passing the 2 over, creating a stitch, and that finishes it off. As you can see, it is fully closed using this method. Continue until you're down to your last stitch. Once you're down to the last loop on your left hand, it's time to get out your scissors and cut the thread. Just snip it right off. All that's left to do is remove your hand from the loop and pass the thread that you've just snipped through that loop, and that will create a knot that will tie off your scarf. If you like it like this and just want to leave it, then that's fine, but I'm going to show you how to add little tails to the scarf to make a nice fringe at the end. You're going to measure twice 35 centimeters, but only cut at the 70 centimeter mark. You're going to fold those strands in half and tie them to the bottom of the scarf to create the fringe. You're going to want to find a loop just like this one, which will be right at the bottom of your scarf. Then you're going to pinch it, insert that strand through, and tie a knot by passing the 2 strands through the loop just like this. That way you'll have 2 tails for the price of 1. Repeat this for every loop at the bottom and more if you want a very thick looking fringe at the bottom of your scarf. Here's one I made earlier where I used 2 strands of chunky wool and 1 strand of regular wool that had a twisted white and grey effect, which helped make the tail look nice and thicker. And again, get creative with this. You don't have to keep it the same colour of the scarf. You can use multiple colours, you can make a rainbow tail. We're really looking forward to seeing what you come up with. Thank you for watching our first video tutorial on this scarf. I hope you enjoyed it. You've been great, and we've been La Recoupe.